Quitting on the stool, moments in UFC. UFC is synonymous with top-level MMA. Thus, when most fight fans think of the highest level of competition and the most skilled fighters in the sport, their minds often narrow to the UFC. The likes of Bellator, ONE, PFL, and others have been tossed aside by the promotion run by Dana White. Stay with us till the end to know some of the quitting moments in UFC. As is common with high-level athletes, UFC fighters usually have a stubborn will to persevere. They refuse to give up, some even choosing to feint rather than secure a tight chokehold on their opponent. Beyond the sheer mental toughness of the fighters, MMA features a pervasive culture that emphasizes that true fighters never quit, which couldn't be further from the truth. Some of the best fighters in the world have surrendered. Even some of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time have faced moments of honesty enough that they had no choice but to admit defeat. It doesn't take away from human nature and the iron will of the warriors to succeed. Instead, it elevates them because it reveals that warriors can give up, rendering countless times that they don't surrender. Truly extraordinary examples of their warrior spirit. And so, this list shows 5 times that UFC fighters quit during their fights. Cynthia Calvillo, UFC Fight Night 197. Before defeating Jessica Eye at UFC on ESPN 10, Cynthia Calvillo had not fought at flyweight since her MMA debut in 2016. Calvillo spent most of her career moving up through the strawweight division, losing only to strawweight champion Carla Esparza. 4 of her 6 wins were official strawweight wins, as Calvillo missed weight in 2 of those bouts, making them a catchweight contest. After dropping weight a 3rd time, this time against Marina Rodriguez, in a fight that was declared a draw, the Californian made the switch to the flyweight division. However, her return to the weight class that first welcomed her to MMA was successful as she defeated Jessica. Calvillo lost her next 2 bouts before meeting Andrea Lee. The fight began as a frantic pace, with Lee gradually overwhelming her foe with a high-volume striking. Coming into the 2nd round, a stabbing front kick to the midsection proved painful enough for Calvillo to retreat. As Lee ramped up his body shots, Calvillo began to drop his hands in anticipation, hoping to catch blocks or parry kicks, knees, and punches. Sadly, all she did was expose her face to Lee's step-in jabs, giving her nemesis permission. Calvillo suffered a broken orbital bone in the 1st round. At the start of the 2nd round, the damage was too much and the Californian left on the stool, prompting her corner to warn the release, who then stopped the fight for a TKO win over Andrea Lee. Cynthia Calvillo unfortunately hasn't stepped inside the octagon since that loss last November. Raquel Pennington, UFC 224. In the main event of UFC 224, Raquel Pennington challenged Amanda Nunes for the Brazilian Greats Bantamweight Championship. Before the fight, and indeed the event itself, much was made of UFC 224 being the first UFC fight card headlined by 2 openly gay fighters. Unfortunately, after the bout, the milestone was forgotten as it ran inside the octagon. Amanda Nunes is the most powerful puncher in women's MMA, able to freeze her foes with just a few strikes due to the lack of experience most fighters have. All divisions have faced fighters with such crippling knockout power. Nevertheless, Pennington put up a spirited effort in her attempt to dethrone the Lioness. Try as she might, though, capturing UFC gold wasn't in Pennington's sights that night. As Pennington became more gun-shy, Nunes brutalized her, chipping away at her confidence with each Nunes punch. Between the 4th and 5th rounds, Rocky gave up on his stool. Frustrated and bruised, she told her coaches that she was finished, begging them to stop the bout. However, in a move that upset the MMA world, Pennington's corner refused to heed their fighter's request. Instead, they asked her to change her mindset before sending her out in the 5th round. She had dominated from the start. 2 minutes in, Pennington was on the wrong end of a TKO, becoming one of the few fighters to leave the stool but forced to continue fighting anyway. Chris Leben, UFC 168. At UFC 168, former middleweight champion Anderson Silva looked to reclaim his title from Chris Weidman in their highly anticipated rematch. On the Brazilian's undercard, a fighter considered by fans and MMA media members alike to be Silva's successor, locked horns with one of the former champion's past opponents, Chris Leben. Leben's opponent was Uriah Hall, a flashy and explosive striker who at the time believed he had the tools needed to one day capture UFC gold. In contrast, Chris Leben was on a 3-fight skid and was hoping to snap the longest losing streak of his career. Yet, when he and Uriah Hall clashed, the disparity between the 2 warriors was palpable. Hall was the ultimate fighter finalist in every way. He was too fast for the crippler, and his footwork stunned an enemy without the tools to cut off his opponent's escape angle. As Leben moved forward, Hall ball closed the center line at an angle that puts him on the open side of his opponent. From there, prime time straight-up counter righted his foe, dropping him to the floor at the buzzer. Levin is known for his toughness throughout his career. Did get off his stool for the second round. The MMA world watched in shock as the crippler finally quit his last MMA fight, telling his coaches between rounds that he was done with the sport. Max Roskoff, UFC on ESPN 11. One of the more recent cases of a fighter quitting during a fight came at UFC on ESPN 11. At the time, Max Roskoff was an undefeated fighter who boasted a record of 5 wins and no losses. In what was his UFC debut, the 27-year-old was held back by a considerable amount of hype. He won all 5 of his bouts by submission, with only one of his foes escaping the first round. The UFC scheduled him to fight Austin Hubbard, whose own record at the time featured 11 wins and 4 losses. Hubbard, however, was a former champion in various MMA promotions, from CAMMA and SCL to Hoosier FC and LFA. Worse, Roskoff took the bout with just 10 days to prepare, leaving him as ill-equipped as he could have been for his UFC debut. Roskoff opened the undercard against his more experienced foe. And as the rounds progressed, it became clear that the young lightweight prospect was overmatched and unprepared, perhaps both. By the end of the second round, it was clear to all spectators that Roskoff had nothing more to offer. As he returned to his corner, the lightweight prospect repeatedly told his corner to stop the bout and that he had no desire to continue. Against Roskoff's wishes, his coach urged him to continue. However, when the UFC D-button never stopped his stool, referee Mark Smith called for a timeout to assess the fighter's condition. After being asked if he wanted to restart the fight, Roskoff refused and the bout was called off. After the fight, the MMA world was in an uproar, with the NAC even announcing its intention to investigate the conduct of Roskoff's corner. BJ Penn, UFC 94. While a glance at his 32-14 record might imply otherwise, BJ Penn is one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. A former UFC lightweight champion who fought too far past his prime. Penn was renowned for his crisp boxing, slick Brazilian jiu-jitsu skill set, and daring warrior spirit. The fearlessness with which the prodigy navigated his MMA career was such that he even faced future light heavyweight champion Lyoto Machida in an open weight contest. At UFC 94, however, he was scheduled to clash with another world champion, Georges St. Pierre. It wasn't the first time the Hawaiian and Canadian legends met inside the octagon. Both fighters fought to a split decision victory for St. Pierre in the UFC 58, years before their highly anticipated rematch. In the 3 years between their first and second outings, both fighters changed and evolved. In the lead-up to the rematch, the prodigy expressed his desire to fight to the death before claiming that he would try to kill his foe inside the octagon. Additionally, Penn punctuates his statement by clearly stating that he is not joking. Undeterred, GSP remained confident, saying that even the best version of BJ Penn wouldn't be good enough to beat him. When the two finally fought, the Canadian had a chance to prove his claim. 4 rounds of dominance resulted in St. Pierre securing multiple takedowns and striking his foe. With Penn back to his corner, he refuted his earlier claims of fighting to the death by begging his brother to stop fighting. The Hawaiian's request was honored, and GSP was declared the winner by TKO. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you up in the next video.